We're official now. And so we wanted to, we are on this crusade. Fort Lauderdale Broward and our certainly Judge Holmes, who is serving as our general counsel. We are certainly concerned about the children of Broward County. We have, up until this year, have had the same state attorney for over 4 decades, I believe, Judge Holmes. And so we have a new state attorney. There have been some challenges. And so we wanted to um, talk to you, Aramis, who's NAACP, y'all, born and raised. She's our own. And she speaks, you'll hear that and you'll understand that. But we want to do everything we can to save our children. And so we know that there were some challenges for you to get into your office as Florida's first Black elected state attorney. We understand that when you walked in the door, you faced a lot of challenges as well. And so we will ask that you will share that path, because I know it wasn't an easy one. But if you will share your story, we'd be greatly appreciative. And we want to hear it and how some of the challenges that you faced as you went on to do about what's fair and justice for all the communities. So if you will, our own Aramis Ayala, the first Black state attorney in the state of Florida, elected, and it was a battle that she won. And as I'm sure she'll share with us, she has won many very important battles. But if you will tell us about you, Ms. Ayala.
Right. Madam President, thank you so very much. Members of the NAACP, it's always a pleasure to be home. It's always a pleasure to be around people who not only understand where you come from, but have the heart of where you'd like to go to. And the story of being state attorney is the beginning. It is, I'm often celebrated as being the first, and I've never taken that lightly in my personal life or professionally. There were certain battles, and I have to be honest, none of those are over. Not for me personally or professionally or any of those who follow me. Well, I made a decision to not run again, not because of defeat or surrender, but because of expansion. Looking for something better and to expand the reach. But when I left, I thought that it was important to support the success, to support what comes after if you really believe in it. So I started on this journey having absolutely no idea that I was going to be the first Black state attorney. I knew that being state attorneys was rare for Black people, and I just kind of accepted that fact. When I ran because I saw the dehumanization of people, of Black, brown, and poor people, but in particular, young Black children. And when you begin to dehumanize children, it then justifies the later dehumanization of them as adults. And I've always found that as a problem when you look at the statistics of how they correlate the amount of prisons that they were built based upon elementary grade reading levels. If we are not caring for children and protecting them on all avenues and on all corners, we are failing our future. So it was, you see the schools trying to step up. You see churches trying to step up. You see, boys and girls clubs and other organizations, community grassroots organizations trying to do the work. And it was important to me to step up as the state attorney and then do my part, because it's all collective. It is a collaborative work to make certain that we are protecting people and redefining justice. And when I ran for that reason, to raise standards of accountability, to challenge the status quo, and most importantly, to redefine justice. There is no justice when we are locking up children hand over foot. There's no justice when we are direct filing children. There is no justice when kids have more issues in front of them than success behind them because of the way the system has been set up. So as soon as I started office, most people knew the work that I did as it relates to the death penalty. And every time I talk about it, I tell everybody I have no regrets, because when we talk about the death penalty, don't celebrate me as the first Black state attorney if you're not going to celebrate the thought and the mind that comes along with the experience. For far too long, we've seen Black people killed at the hands of the state. justified through death penalty. We see the racial disparities. We see additionally the fiscal irresponsibility associated with it in the state of Florida. We spend $51 million above that what we would spend on life sentences if we were to have life without parole. We look at the post-traumatic stress disorder associated with those who are responsible for handing down and actually administering the concoction that takes the life of an individual. It's not a deterrent. When you look at where homicide and violent crime is the highest, it is in the states, including Florida, that have the death penalty. So when you look at the statistics, the lack of deterrent, the amount of money, the racial disparities, that's the conversation that we should be having, not whether or not the state attorney in Orlando should have done that or could have done that. We have to talk about the failed policy. So that being said, that was my first entrance into the pushback and the question of my discretion as state attorney. And that is where, when you say what are the issues that the state attorneys are facing, historically, when you had majority white males serving as elected state attorneys, the question about their discretion was never a topic. When you look at whether it's law review articles, when you look at research, when you look at, it was always, that's their decision, they can do it. But when the face and the mindset of the prosecutor began to change, then we started questioning the level of discretion. So we have to be mindful that the manipulation has begun because that discretion is being used to benefit a different demographic. That discretion is being used to empower the people, to change the mindset, to give children an opportunity, to give people second chances. And let's not forget to make certain victims of crime are treated with a level of dignity and respect that they never had before. Because our criminal justice system is certainly a revolving door where one day you're a victim, the next day you're possibly a defendant, the next day a victim. The demographic of people who are charged in our criminal justice system is very reflective of victims. So when we talk about reform, when we talk about how we treat people in the criminal justice system, we cannot leave out the victims of crime. So that was always a priority as state attorney, but recognizing as we move forward, the use of discretion has become a big question of whether or not prosecutors should have it. And we recognize that it correlates very strong with the new mentality of a prosecutor. So that's one of the first things that we have to be able to deal with. The people who are being cared for. You know, when I started, one of the things that I was able to do for after the death penalty was implement what I called Project No-No. And what was happening is young children were being cycled through the system with a official court record, even though they were not arrested, nor did we ever charge the person. Either we didn't have enough information, they were diverted out of the system, but by the time they were an adult, they still had that record as a juvenile. So we came up with a process to reroute all of the reports that came to not go to the clerk's office. And we made a determination in my office, if there's no arrest, and if there's no charging, there will be no record for those children. That's how we started it off. I did everything that I could to support the civil citations and all the work that they were doing, and I still stand by that. It was extremely important to make certain that we protected that. Then close to the end of my term, it was all over national news, but certainly locally and across the state. You know, in less than a week, one day we had multiple children, 2 children, 1 5 and 1 6 or 7, who were arrested out of school for childlike behavior. We have now criminalized a tantrum. We have now criminalized adults' inability to manage a child. And while, yes, my office, we dropped the case. We spoke with the law enforcement agency who was responsible to make certain that an administrative expungement would be activated immediately. But either way, the child was saved from the system. But the mental, the impact of the child psychologically, we may never know. But then when we talk about the distrust of our criminal justice system, when we are doing things that lack credibility, that lack trust, what do we expect? So now you're dealing with families, you're dealing with young kids growing up and needing to be protected. But I said I was going to do all I could in that moment as the prosecutor to make certain that that child knew you are a child and will be treated like one. You are not a criminal. I then followed up by taking that trip to Tallahassee and working very closely with our legislature to establish an age where there would be a minimum age for arrest for children, because prior to that, there was no minimum age. And now, I mean, obviously it's still, I still don't think that it's appropriate, but we're working on it. And I think that moving forward, we have to continue to care about our children, look at expanding the diversion options. So even after that, the other thing that I was able to do was to establish a system where sealing and expungement was initiated at the state attorney's office. So they didn't have to go hire an attorney. We were able to get the paperwork filled out as soon as they finished their term of probation, where it could be automatically done. So there was we created systems, and that was important to me, that when you're making change, you want to make change that is difficult to undo, to untie after you depart. So while I set up system, I also supported my successor, who has done an amazing job of building upon it as I move forward, not just to focus on criminal justice reform, but to expand it, because there are so many other issues that impact Black communities. We never, ever focus a big, and I want to bring an extreme attention to that, is environmental injustice. You know, right here in Orlando, and I'm sure down in Broward, there are so many issues, whether they're coal mine, like all the plants, the affordable energy that were often left out of the conversation. So there has to be advocates who are there for environmental justice. We have to have advocates beyond criminal justice who are looking at affordable and quality health care, where we have facilities in the neighborhoods where the people who need it the most. We have to have affordable housing and economic opportunity. And those are the things that I'm ready to spread and do the work. So that can be done in a lot of different ways, but I will continue the work that I have done building upon it. But I did not decide not to run because of controversy. Controversy comes with change. If we all recognize the process of change, there are the 3 steps. You start change, and it comes with fear, and it comes with caution, and then eventually you've got concession. So I understand where we are in the process, that it was scary to some people, but when you are strong, you got a back like a brick, you keep moving. And the groundwork has been laid with the conversation of the death penalty, with the juvenile reforms, bail reform, conviction integrity, the creation of a Brady list that had never occurred in the community, expanding our use of force reviews in the office. We also did some retroactivity work when they changed the law as it relates to drugs. There were some people who were still sitting in custody on that. Like I said, drug diversion programs, prostitution for human trafficking, resisting officers without violence can now be diverted and take people taken out of the system. But ultimately, the goal was to begin to change the culture of prosecution to truly serve the people and redefine justice in a way that was much beyond retribution and revenge, but to have one of restoration and rehabilitation. And that was the work that I've done as state attorney. And it is my hope that all of those who follow understand the obstacles ahead, that understand, that we are moving forward and there are going to be challenges, but that there is momentum for change. There is a heart for change. There is a heart for justice. And that comes from all of us having a heart for the people. And that's been my work. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to share, hopefully encourage, and to answer any of the questions that I can moving forward, but also addressing some of the past.
Thank you, Aramis. We have, I know that there was recently a bill passed that spoke to children that are arrested 7 and under. We certainly know that here, and we'll speak Broward, but I know there are others as well, where there are arrests of children. We want to address the children 12 and under that are taken into custody, handcuffed, and take that big ride out to our juvenile assessment center. And in many cases, the state may decide to decline to file. They may determine, we found that, juvenile civil citation should have been given, but wasn't. And so we are in and we find ourselves now working to put into place stop gaps at every entry point for juveniles. And so 7 and under, it wasn't what was initially asked for, but it's what we have. And so we were, any thoughts on how we can work with our current administration on 12 and under? We're talking about misdemeanors, we're talking about violent crimes and that sort of thing. And I'll defer to Judge Holmes to talk about the program that we are asking, not necessarily program, the policy that we are asking our current state attorney to put into place. Judge Holmes.
Right. Thank you, Madam President. And Ms. Ayala, always a pleasure to see you. Here in Broward County, the NAACP has asked the current administration and the state attorney's office to issue a policy memo to law enforcement that children who are 12 years of age and under don't get arrested and taken to jack without at least notifying someone in a supervisory capacity in the juvenile division. We've been working on this. Well, I have with the president of the NAACP here since January of this year, trying to get this done. Did you have a policy in place, or I mean, how did you handle those types of arrests? Because some law enforcement officers, they don't care about civil citation under 985.12. They're just going to make that arrest and drop them off at the Juvenile Assessment Center. So what was your policy with regard to young people? We have some help, a reprieve with Senate Bill 590. Yeah, or actually it's House Bill 1750, don't arrest 7-year-olds and under. But what was your policy and how did you handle that?
So very frank, as horrible as it is, even coming in as a state attorney, the prevalence of children being arrested was unknown. And I think that the case that I did handle opened up our eyes to the need for these policies. So while it was unknown to the public, it wasn't a conversation. There were so many other issues that we were dealing with and changing the culture that the insight of that led to the need was not there. So ours began shortly before my term ended, where we did start having the conversations about having a supervisor being called. So fortunately, it was a dialogue that allowed the local police departments to agree to that without having to have an MOU, without having to have, the request from them. They took a lot of heat as it relates to the arrest of Cairo, of the little girl who was arrested. And fortunately, we had just gotten a new police chief for the city of Orlando who actually understands some of the balances and the imbalances of treatment. So for me, we didn't have to move forward with a policy because they were proactive with it. The downside of it is that I was elected in 2016, and that had not been the attention in 2017, in 2018, and 2019, which is an indictment on our entire legal system as it relates to the arresting of children. It is brought to the light, and unfortunately, a child has been, I think, forever changed. But that change, I hope, makes certain that others aren't impacted as well.
May I ask a follow-up to that, Madam?
Yes, ma'am.
You said that you didn't have to issue a memorandum of understanding, or you didn't have to issue a memo saying this is, our office's stance and do this. How did you do the dialogue? I mean, what brought about the general acceptance of this idea?
I'd love to take credit for it, but I think it was external pressure. It was in the moment. There wasn't a hypothetical. There was a very real situation with a child in tears, with an innocent child, an innocent Black girl in tears, being carried through, handcuffed, not even understanding what was happening. So for me, it was seizing that moment that didn't make it speculative or hypothetical. So therefore, when you have conversations in the moment, it's very ripe for the change. So I would love to say that we could duplicate that. It was literally about being prepared in the moment to make the argument.
And so we have, I'm not sure how many different law enforcement agencies were under your jurisdiction there. We have
21.
So we have not quite that many, but we do have some law enforcement agencies. Many, some of them are smaller departments. We have a sheriff so far that has been on board with juvenile civil citation and juvenile diversion. We found that Broward was the third worst in the state of Florida when it came to issuing civil citations to those children who qualified to do so. And so we started down this road to make sure that we got back on the right track. It was the opposite a few years ago, and somewhere along the line, even prior to COVID, we veered left off course there. So your thoughts on a civil citation? And I don't know, like here when we talk diversion, that means that the kid has been arrested. Now they may go into a post-arrest program, but we really want to get children to in a pre-arrest space if they have to arrest, if they must, and it's a misdemeanor, and it certainly and it qualifies. I don't know if you all had that, how much you all used civil citation there. Was there much push from your office? I know at just about at the end of your term, Judge Holmes, it was 2019, wasn't it, that civil citation was moved from the county's spot over to the state attorney's office. So now the state attorney's office has both diversion and civil citation. What were your thoughts on civil citation itself?
Is that to me or Judge?
Yes, that's to you. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think that, first of all, anything that is going to keep a person who does not need to be in the system out is a good thing, no matter what. Even if it has downsides, there are ways to reduce any type of danger associated with it. What I believe is that we start talking about how we respond and we talk about the lowest level. Until we start talking about the highest level and reducing that ceiling, everything else is going to be like not that big of a deal. And I use this example frequently, as you know, even with death penalty, as long as we have death penalty as the ceiling, 30-year sentences are nothing. So the same concept is applicable. As long as we are charging children as adults, as long as we are elevating them to places and sending them, for long periods of time, then a civil citation or charging them really doesn't mean anything. So I think we have to get to a place where the conversation starts, where we're doing the most up here, and then that shows how unrealistic it is to even have to issue a citation instead of taking a kid home. There are many children who may not look like, the typical ones who end up getting taken down on or issued a citation, who do get a ride home, who do get a slap on the wrist, who do just get their parents called. There's a different concept that we have to normalize for young Black children. No matter what you think of their living situation, how responsible you think that the parent might be, that should not mess up their opportunity to even eliminate the civil citation. So I fully support it. I believe that it should be an option. I know you talked about in Broward, in our office, my former office, we did handle both civil citations and diversions. And that's how we came up with the Project No, because if there wasn't arrest, and there also shouldn't be a record, and then we just eliminated that particular file. So I think that we have to do a better way of possibly rewriting it in the statute. There was a lot of conversation of whether or not it could be mandatory. I think that we need to explore that conversation, especially when it comes to some kids. where we're not looking at the possibility of arrest, especially as you said earlier, Madam President, if we're going to divert them. If we're going to divert them anyhow, then why are we bringing them into the system, arresting them, and then diverting them? Let's recognize the possibility of diversion on the front end.
Yeah, there was a bill filed recently that spoke to diversion. And it seems like there are outside conversations being held, perhaps in Tallahassee and maybe even in DC, regarding juvenile diversion. I know that there was a veto of a bill recently that the governor decided that he didn't want to give folk, he thought they'd be raping and all kinds of madness and they'd be able to get their record expunged, which obviously was not the case. But he used it as an excuse to veto the bill. So I think there were we're gonna have to be very mindful on and have people speak out from DC to Tallahassee and to locally when it comes to the good that juvenile diversion does, because otherwise we're going to look and see that the kids that don't look like me, they do go home, but they have one answer for juvenile diversion. So, Judge, if you'll tell us a little bit about that bill that has been filed so far regarding diversion.
Well, that bill that the governor vetoed would have made it automatic for juveniles who, first offenders who had finished and completed their sentences, to automatically have their records sealed and expunged. The governor, of course, vetoed it. There is a move now to refile that bill because many of the sponsors, and it was unanimously passed through both chambers, they said, well, maybe he misunderstood what our intent was. But there seems to be a push to prohibit, and most of the children that go through the diversions and the civil citations, they do look like us. You know, how do we combat that? Because you were doing it automatically through your office. The child didn't have to come up with the $75 and pay FDLE to do. I don't even know why FDLE is involved with a juvenile anyway, but you know. So I mean, what do you think the future of that is going to be? You think it will continue to be vetoed, or I'm not asking you to be clairvoyant, but you know, there's an upside to it, and I don't see any downsides to it.
I mean, unfortunately, we are dealing with a governor who is not always pragmatic, but more emotional, pulling at the heartstrings, because to suggest anything other than productivity from this particular bill that we're speaking about is just misleading. When you look at the data associated with recidivism in the juvenile system and with young children, recidivism rates are extremely low for second-time offenders. The bulk of them don't return. So we're not looking, as you know, Madam President has indicated, as, oh, you get your record expunged and then you end up, you know, in some serious violations. If you're able to complete a diversion, if you're able to do that, then you have the support and the mindset to be there. So I think that if there is a self-interest where passing it would benefit him and or those who think like him, then it might work. But when you have selfish political goals and a closed mind that really isn't for the people, then we can't be surprised when the decisions and the outcomes don't reflect that voice of the people. So I am not as optimistic as I would like to be, because even those who support our current governor, they're not going to be offended if he doesn't do it. It's going to be the people who don't support him who are just hopeful that he will do the right thing. So if we can frame it in a manner that can benefit him, then I think it's more likely. But if it's really just a very pure mission and it is just the right thing to do, I'm not as optimistic in that regard.
And one more follow up to that, because you raised sort of a way around that by, look, you're the state attorney. These state attorneys in all of these circuits can do what you did, just automatically start the procedure to seal and expunge. So what types of crimes were not eligible for your office to begin those type of proceedings?
We went along strictly with the statutory basis for FDLE. So if it was eligible with FDLE, even if it was on the maybe, we went ahead and helped provide that. So we didn't have the authority to expunge it, but we certainly had the authority to initiate the process where they don't have to go through that whole rigorous process that most people who really were able to make it through the system can't do, and then it's not a pressing issue right then. Most people who are going through the system don't understand that this will catch up with you years later. So we have to be proactive on their behalf because that's what service is. That's what justice is. And while prosecutors are often, pegged as looking at the conviction, justice isn't just a conviction, right? It also is making certain that you do your part and be accountable. If I can sentence someone, I can also free them.
For our listening audience, there are many that aren't familiar with the sealing and expunging. So how did that process start in your office? Okay, for instance, a child got arrested at Walmart and it was $302 of stuff, but they went through a diversion. Okay, what happened after they completed diversion?
So we would let them know on the front end that when you finish this diversion program, that here's what your options are. So it would be their incentive. And as they continue to meet with, whether it was their pretrial officer or otherwise throughout their throughout their diversion period, then they would let them know at the last end of it, during the last class, the last meeting or whatever, here is your paperwork that you have now completed this. They fill it out. We actually would have one of our law enforcement agency, our members in our office, an investigator there to roll the print so that all the paperwork was completed. And then we filled it out. You're finished doing your part, and then we submit it, and then they just have to wait. So it is out of our hands, but that initial part of it, we were completely committed to. Like I said, I used the manpower where we took an investigator who was assigned down at our juvenile office to be present there for anyone who needed to have that the document completed with the rolled prints. We used that, and we would let them know what day of the week the officer would be there in order to do that. And I have absolutely no regrets on initiating that process.
Thank you, Madam President.
Well, that's exactly what we don't have here. We have a number of juvenile diversion providers, but the students or the children, which I guess are student, the children are not being told that once they successfully complete the program, that here's your opportunity. I know that it was done several years ago, but I haven't seen that for a while. And so the children are not having that juvenile expunction done. So I think that's one of the things that we will need to speak to our current administration about getting that done. I don't know if you know, Judge or Ms. Ayala, what kind of time frame they have in order to get their expunction done, their administrative expunction done. I just know that we're not doing it anymore here in Broward County.
So there's two different, there's the judicial and the administrative expungement, and this one is for the judicial. The sad thing that hurt my heart, even with the little 5-year-old girl, Kaya Roll, who was arrested here, that got the administrative expungement, under the statute, you're given one. So she had to use her one opportunity because of their failure to treat a child like a child. So the one that my office is initiating is a judicial one where we have to sign off. FDLE has to go through it versus just the law enforcement agency making the admission, we should not have done this, and going forward. So that's the minor difference that And again, the politics of it can also impact it, because if a state attorney pursues an administrative expungement, the part of it is that they're worried, they're worried about the legal ramifications, because there is a somewhat of an oath. There's a statement that is made in that pursuit of the administration that it was a wrongful arrest. It shouldn't have happened. So then if you have the state attorney who is engaging in making that statement, now are you posturing the individual for a lawsuit? And for me, if you are, like, even as a lawyer, if someone has done something wrong, I don't think that it is my responsibility to protect you from that in the pursuit of justice. But that is just a little reminder of, as you asked, what is in front of us, that the things that people believe they have to juggle as they move forward.
I think there are some jurisdictions I've seen that talked about a mental health court, certainly geared toward juveniles. We have just a ton of children who have mental health disabilities. And they, things have happened. They were, arrested. Even if they were diverted because of their disabilities, they are unable to complete the program that was assigned to them. Did you all do anything with children who have mental health diagnosed mental health disabilities, where their diagnosis predicted the behavior that they would exhibit? Was there anything that you all did to assist those children with mental health disabilities?
In the state of Florida, and I'm sure Judge Holmes will let her head spin with mine. In the state of Florida, our statutory construction of mental health it's a mess. I don't even know how to say that in a nice way. We are not. The way that it's drafted and written is not for the safety of people. It is not for the rights of the individual. You can tell that the drafting of it was not by people who understand the dynamics of mental health or being victimized by a person who has a mental health issues. So yes, I'll say yes, we do, but it is only within the parameters of what I believe is a defectively drafted laws and procedures for mental health. People who should be in are released, especially when it's misdemeanor related. There's nothing else the court can do as it relates to jurisdiction. When it comes back, there's so many avenues that you have to reach in order to have the person back into on the trial docket. It's extremely convoluted from the start, which is why a lot of the jurisdictions start with mental health court. But that doesn't mean that they're truly going to be diverted, because in the end, the only thing that is going to give them the authority to do so is the statutory drafting of it. And we don't have that in the state of Florida. I would love to hear Judge Holmes on how problematic our statutes are as it relates to mental health, but it doesn't benefit anyone, no matter what side of the aisle you end up on, no matter what side of victimization or committing the crime. We are completely ineffective and incompetent as it relates to our mental health laws.
Judge Holmes?
I will say this, that I didn't have many juvenile cases because of the type of cases that I tried. But Florida Statute 916 has always been problematic in terms of, making a determination of competency for the proceedings to stand trial, to come to hearings or things like that, and then leaving the ultimate adjudication of competency up to a judge who may have taken 2 or 3 psychology classes or read psychology today. But unfortunately, the rules of criminal procedure 3.211, talking about insanity and incompetence, leave it up to the judge. The judge does get some help by, appointing, and we had to fight for years to get 3 doctors to come in and evaluate the person. And then the case law started being promulgated that you don't need to appoint 3 doctors, just, get one that will say, uh, and I found that a lot of the doctors were torn depending on who hired them. And, there was one doctor that found everybody incompetent. There was another doctor, every judge knew that when he or she came into court, that everybody would be competent. They would find a tomato to be competent. And just, if you follow the money, and I'm learning that in my post years off the bench, if you follow the money, prisons and mental health facilities, they're not funded. They don't really get a lot of attention, and the money is not there to solve the problem. And Ms. Ayala is absolutely correct. We send these people off to mental facilities. In the criminal division, we send them up to Chattahoochee. We used to have the South Florida hospital, but that's closed. So everybody goes to Chattahoochee. So you got limited space. So they got to come back competent within 90 days or something, even though the statute says 6-month review. I would put them on a bus on Friday, and the next Friday they're back in the courtroom, swatting flies and everything. And I said, who found this person to be competent? So mental health so from an adult perspective, it's pitiful. For children, for juveniles, is draconian, because there's a segue. I don't want to get ahead of you, Madam President, but we were looking and doing some work with the Southern Poverty Law Center on behalf of the NAACP. And we found through their statistics that 37,000 plus children every year are Baker acted. So I don't know what your experience and what your office found, because it probably, it doesn't go to your office really, because there are 3 entities under that statute, and that would be a judge, a medical provider, or the police. That statute has been amended, but in the past, for instance, a child went to school, had a tantrum, and the administrator, either a VP, vice principal, or the principal, would call the police, and the child, would kick the police officer, and they'd be Baker acted. Parents would come home and call the police and report their children missing, because there really was no strict notification under that rule. So children and going into these facilities, I have found that most of those facilities are privately owned, but the state pays for the stay of the children. So Ms. Ayala, did you find anything else when you were state attorney in the 9th Circuit here in Florida?
Is that for me?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't find anything else different. I was always concerned about the Baker Act, because what we did is, while the statute does say that to the facilities, we would have an attorney go to the facilities and make a determination. Well, not really make a determination, but hear what was going on, so that we could, update the court and or update the victims of whatever crime of what is happening. So we were involved in the process, but didn't really have any authority over it. As it relates to juveniles, it's the other part of the problem is that for their age already, has a level of incompetence associated with it, which is what I always wondered. I was a sex crimes prosecutor, and we always knew that victims of sex crimes who were under the age, who were around anytime under the age of 7, right? They're 5, 6, 7. We automatically knew that we had an uphill battle, because we were going to have to declare them competent. We were going to have to find a way to do the colloquy on, is this, am I telling a truth or lie? What color is this, the red or blue? All the things that we go through in order to qualify a child for competence. So we question their competence when they're a victim, but the reverse is not the same. We don't question their competence if they are a defendant. To me, that level of inequality and inconsistency is what begins the whole trail of injustice for children.
Yeah, I found that when we, our NAAC, our branch had used to have a diversion program, and we would come into contact with juveniles, a juvenile diversion program, that were found to be incompetent by the courts, but the state attorney didn't drop the charge, and where it could be minor, whatever the case may be, um, it could go on indefinitely until something else happened. The child did not get treatment. The child did not get it, did anything. The charge remained indefinitely, and so something should have happened to the juveniles. We believe that should have allowed the child to get the care that he or she needed, instead of just being able to, just be there with these criminal charges that they don't understand, that they, in many cases, they would have a mental health diagnosis, they are on meds, but they are just standing there. And so, eventually something else may happen, maybe a trespass, maybe something else. And so now they have these two things, but they still have the child adjudicated incompetent to mentally ill and incompetent to stand trial. So we have to figure out something in order to help these kids. We just had a really horrible incident that happened that we're waiting for the child to receive services. In the meantime, he was out and about waiting for getting into a program. It never happened. And then something horrible happened with those. I think we have to do better on mental health for children overall, and a better understanding, maybe from, the entire circuit, as not just the PD's office, but also the state attorney's office here, because that's quite frankly is not happening. And so your child can just linger. In the meantime, the parent are just looking for assistance. They're looking for help, because we just don't know where to go, because there's not a real understanding of mental illness as we know, and its connection to the court system here. So we're struggling, with it, and I'm afraid with the COVID and all this going on, it's going to get even worse. And so you all have a detention center there in your jurisdiction in Orange County or Osceola that you all had children that you would send your lawyers to go and see?
Well, we would not necessarily, well, I'm sorry, for mental health, they were usually at the hospital.
Or for just children that were being held in the detention center?
Generally speaking, our
y'all-
prosecutors would not go out there unless they were going to negotiate something and hear from their public defender otherwise. But it's still a case processing system. So if you get a file and there's a victim, or if you get a file and there's not a victim, that's how the system is set up to function. So it does require that being a priority of the state attorney, that being a priority of the people. And one thing that I've noticed is that the people push the agenda. And you, Madam President, are so consistent in your passion for children and the system. And when more people catch hold of that, I believe then you will see people in the legislature running on platforms of how they're going to fix, statute. You will see prosecutors, I believe, running on platforms that will address mental health. But I think that it has to catch. It hasn't, unfortunately, caught the need for us to address mental health as it relates to juveniles. And therefore, it's more of a talking piece than it is an actual agenda item, sadly.
And let me ask you, Aramis, what do you think our, as NAACP, relationship should be with our state attorney? I see the president of the Bay County branch NAACP on the phone, the Reverend Dr. Rufus Woods. I see Mr. James Miners from South Brevard, and I see Mr. Sean Kinsey from the Lake Wales branch. What would you say to my colleagues about the relationship, the ideal relationship that they should have with their state attorney when it comes to both children or adults? It's justice, period.
I would say that it is the NAACP's responsibility to be the bridge for communications, but also accountability for the people. The voice of the people rings very loud when there is a consistent name, a consistent organization, a consistent concept. And when you are in elected office, you know, when I was a state attorney, I knew names. People assume, oh, I'm just, no, I know the name that is constantly, ringing and going to make it a living hell if you don't do that. So I think if you don't do whatever that topic is, I think that it is incumbent upon, the NAACP to be that strong voice, to be consistent, to be poised, but to be well read so that you're not blown off. You know, a lot of times when you don't really understand the issue and you're just throwing the emotional component there, it's difficult to be taken seriously. State attorneys naturally have had just by their title, they've had legal education that doesn't always bode well with an emotional interpretation. So prosecutors it's their job to now make certain that they do connect with the emotional side, but I do think that it is education is necessary and being able to talk on that level. The other thing is very well connected to that. Prosecutors have a legal responsibility, an ethical responsibility that may sometimes be in conflict with what the people really want, and quite frankly, even what that prosecutor may want. And the only way to maintain peace in the community is communication. And the prosecutor is going to need a partner. I like to help the people understand. I wanted to charge that police officer, but I couldn't. And here's why. I wanted to, drop this particular case or, go higher on the sentence, but I couldn't. And here's why. Here's what went into my decision. And when you have a representative from the NAACP who is truly the voice of the people, who will speak to them in a more homegrown, real connection than you speaking directly to them, it's a huge benefit. The people who I wanted on my team in the community were people who would help me hear the words of the people so I could know what their concerns were, but also talk to the people in a way that they would understand from someone who is always on their side. Because the prosecutor's not always on their side. Let's just be very real. Prosecutors cause harm. Right? That's part of our job that we take on. So I hope that answers the question, but being a bridge and being a voice, but also being a source of accountability could really, really begin to bridge very strong relationships.
Okay. And so, Miss Ayala, you are running for a new office. Certainly, we were sad to see you go from your space there. However, we know that there were greater things that line your path. So, tell us what is this office that you're running for, and tell us why you want to hold this office.
I am running for United States Congress, Florida's District 10. Congressman Val Demings has decided to vacate her seat in order to run for United States Senate. And I think that it is important for someone who understands the voice of the people, someone who has been committed to the work of the people and has actually done tangible work that moves the people in a way and represents them in a way that they never have ever believed could happen with continuity. We are living in a time where the people's voice is heard, but it is rarely translated into change. We're having this conversation over and over again, but not always seeing the fruits of our labor. We constantly have symbolic victories, but we're not having real victories that are changing lives. And I'm running because I want to lead the way to change lives outside of just criminal justice system. I've proven that I am always standing for the people. I've proven that I am evidence-based, research-based, but always with a heart for the people. And I think that the work that I did as state attorney wasn't cut short because I didn't run for re-election. It was a platform for me to do two things: make certain that the person who succeeded me had the same heart and mind for the people, and then elevating me so that I could expand the reach and be prosecution progressive, 2.0. Who is, as I said earlier, looking at things that relate to, mental health. We just talked about looking at affordable housing. I'm a cancer survivor who was 24 hours from death. I understand and care about healthcare. I think about my mom who passed away just this past February, and I have no doubt that we had her a little bit longer because of the health care that she was able to have. And I think that every American really deserves to have their family members as long as they can with affordable and accessible health care. I think about this whole housing crisis that we have. And certainly one of the most important things that Black people don't always talk about is environmental justice. Like, we don't think about the air we're breathing, the water that we're drinking, or the things that impact us. And I think that it's important to lead that conversation. We've got technology issues. We all saw through COVID the disparities of not just who was catching COVID, but whose kids were able to stay up educationally because they had access to certain things. So I'm running because I have a voice and a heart for the people. I understand the dynamics of the Democratic Party. I'm a church girl. I grew up, I understand, some of the centrist values that I appreciate because they've been there, they've seen it. But I also understand the progressive mindset that knows it is time for change. And when you put those two things together with the heart for the people, the competence and the desire to make humanity really strong, who understands that we have manipulated Christianity, where Republicans have manipulated Christianity in a way that doesn't really serve the last, the least, and the lost. It is, and I believe that we need people in government who understand what mercy is, who understand what it means to care about people and allow that spirit to become contagious.
And so before Judge asks her question, tell us about what your thoughts are on police reform.
Um, I have so many. It's become such a difficult question to answer. And yes, the glasses come off on that one. It's such a difficult question because we all know that it's necessary, right? But reform generally comes from within. There's a reason I ran to be state attorney, because I wanted to change from within. When you want to do something in a home, don't tell people what they should be doing. You infiltrate and you come into their home, you love on them. So we have a need for it. We have a desire for it. We're crying for it. There's blood shed for it. But until the heart of those on the inside reflects the heart of those they are supposed to serve, I think that we're going to be on this hamster wheel, sadly. So it's time to push further. It's time to infiltrate. But because what is happening is reform should be bringing us together. And what you keep seeing is the community chugging along closer and chugging along closer. But when we begin to see ideas for change and public safety and caring for the people come from within law enforcement, then we have something new. Then I think we're going to be able to hope in a way that we've never hoped before. So my thoughts on police reform, it's needed. Too much blood has been shed. I will not stop fighting for it, believing in it, and standing up for it. But I also have a sober perspective on how far we've come and how far we need to go.
Judge Holmes?
Oh, I have so much. I enjoyed talking to you, Ms. Aramis.
Likewise.
I think you figured that out. We were on a panel for the NAACP when I first met you, talking about stand your ground.
Yep.
But let's get back to the juveniles, if I could, for a moment. If you wrote an anatomy for reform for the juvenile justice system, where would it start? So anatomy, where would we start for that?
The heart. The heart. The heart is what frames even how the mind thinks. When you are thinking about establishing and building a body, if you will, the first thing that happens is the heartbeat. The last thing that happens is the heartbeat. So I think that it is important to understand how it's beating, what's making it beat, what is making it slow down, what makes it speed up, what contaminates it, how do you end up with a stroke versus a heart attack, all of the things that go into it. I think that it is important for us to understand the heart of juvenile justice and the people who are functioning it, understanding their heart. So the heart definitely, by all means.
And who has the heart of the juvenile justice system?
Right now, I think no one. Sadly, juveniles, well, other than Madam President, because she's nonstop about it, and I appreciate that. It's always it's a fresh reminder for me as well to continue the work every time I hear her voice. But I think that we laugh and we make comments, but I remember that song, Greatest Love of All by Whitney Houston. And she, the children are the future. I believe that. And until we refocus that they are the future, I think we're going to continue to be lost, and they're not going to be the heart of people. What has happened, sadly, is that you have parents and grandparents who are struggling for their lives. Right? And COVID has not helped this at all. So it is easy to forget those who don't have a voice for themselves. It's easy to forget that. So when we admit that the crime rates, education rates, that is their voice saying, I need help. That is their voice. That's their scream that we need to be listening to. So when someone catches that, I think that's when we will see someone who has the heart of the people. I think you have teachers. There are so many teachers and people who run boys and girls clubs who truly have the heart, but unfortunately they don't have the power. So we have to empower those who have a natural heart towards the children to be able to make the change. Like I said, even through COVID, when the teachers wanted to protect children, when they wanted to speak out for children, it was silenced because they weren't in the power position. So no matter what, if it's a teacher in a classroom who doesn't want the child arrested, if the higher authorities decide, then that's what happens. We have to empower those who have a natural heart for children to be able to be their voice, because in every courtroom, what do you have? A guardian ad litem. Somebody is speaking for the children, and we have to admit that it's teachers, it is leaders, it is community leaders who do have that heart for the people. Who have the heart for the children, and ensure that we're listening to that voice.
And then lastly, if I can play devil's advocate, I'm out in the community with my mask on, and I'm talking to people. And the sentiment is, why are we sending folks to Washington when nothing happens? Mitch McConnell has an agenda. He says that he's going to make sure that nothing that Joe Biden wants to do gets passed. There are obstructionists everywhere. Why send you to that type of atmosphere, knowing that we pay salaries but nothing gets done? How do you respond to that?
Why do we plant mustard seeds, right? Like, we plant so that we can have a harvest. And we have to realize that we are not in this instant oatmeal like era. There are some things that have to be cooked, that have to marinate. That we have to continue what we're doing no matter what we see the present outcome, because all the changes that we see in this country, all the changes where we have seen evolution and development and elevation, all of that has happened because of seeds where people have lost their lives. So when you're sending someone to Washington, it has to be someone who is willing to go knowing that they may not see the fruits of their labor, but they will plant a seed, that they will begin to change the culture. It will be there challenging and being a voice for the people, even in the midst of the dark days. And that's the type of person who needs to go, not someone who is going to hunker down and silence their voice and be afraid, not someone who is going to just speak loud so it sounds good, but someone who is going to be strategic in making a way to navigate that one day. Guess what? We're going to see that flower come above the ground. We're going to see people empowered. We're going to see children saved. We're going to see a level of justice that we have planted, because no matter what, we're going to see what is planted today one day. So what are we planting? And I say, send me there as a root, send me there as a plant, send me there as that seed, so that one day we can see justice roll down like the waters. That's what I think of. So yeah, I think that it's important to be sober about it, but never lose heart.
And so, Ms. Ayala, we're in the battle of our lives, all of us, including the children, when it comes to the anti-protest bill here in Florida, and not just Florida, but all across the nation, but certainly here in Florida. tell me where you are on this, which we believe is much unneeded anti-protest bill. And then if you will then go on to our struggles for voting rights, certainly here in Florida, because tell us where your the congressional seat covers what areas,
It's
cities.
District 10, but like the Northwest Orlando area, parts of Orlando, Windermere, Winter Garden, Apopka, Ocoee, that area.
Okay.
Um, where am I as it relates to deciding that you can run people over who are exercising their First Amendment rights? Where am I as it relates to not being able to offer someone water because they're standing in line? Where I am is appalled. I was born in 1975 and I read about the 60s. I have no idea why my 9-year-old and 7-year-old are hearing common stories that my parents and my grandmother have been able to share. I am appalled that we have reversed the progress that so many people have died for, and we're laughing at it. We're belittling it. We're acting like it's not repetitive. So I think that it is important for us to do all that we can to fight back, but not only fight, call it like it is. Like, let's stop trying to appease the oppressor. Let's change it so that the freedom that has been fought for can be walked in. I think that if we are so careful about making someone who is literally trying to strip us of our right to live, if we're careful about what we say to them, how are we really a fighter for the people? So I believe in recognizing that it is sickening, it is appalling, it is racist, it is discriminatory, it is bringing our ugly past and roots that this country was built upon, it is making them live again. I think that's just what it is. And we have to continue to call it what it is, no matter who it offends, no matter who doesn't like it. The truth is the truth. Malcolm X said it years ago, like, I am for truth no matter who speaks it. And we need to continue to speak it in a way that challenges people who aren't willing aren't committed to either side. I think that there are some who are going to stay there no matter what because it maintains their power. There are some who are going to fight like us, who to do whatever to change it. And then there's those in the middle who really don't know which way to go. We have to speak to them. We have to speak truth in a way that allows them to say that the only America that we know is one that should be for justice, that should be for righteousness, that should be a true democracy that doesn't stop people from voting. I mean, what is that? What we teach children, and this is, like I said, it's a whole nother issue, but we teach elementary kids, middle school and high school about this democracy. But what we're doing is the exact opposite. We are limiting people from participating in a democracy and making it more difficult to do it. So stand up, get up, do something. And that's what I'm ready to do.
Okay. We're also battling, so, and today we're talking about our students going back to schools. We're talking about mask versus unmask, and you know that our president is having the darndest time in DC looking for help from folk about support when it comes to masks, and should they be mandated, should they not. We know what's going on in Florida, but we know we need help certainly in DC as well. So tell us where you are on this COVID-19, what you know to be true, and the effects of mask and being vaccinated.
What I know is that science works, right? The chairs that all of us are sitting on are based upon physics that we learned in science. The air that we're breathing and how we made it clean and purified the water is based upon science. The clothes on our backs, based upon science. Everything that we do, the lighting in these rooms, based upon science. So if we can rely on science for buildings, clothing, air, all the things that we utilize on a day-to-day basis, the cars that we drive, why now are we going to throw science out the door? There are medical professionals who, yes, it is the practice of medicine, but they have been trained in order to be able to address this in a way that they have a background in. So I believe in trusting medical professionals. And when they tell us to get vaccinated because it will reduce the likelihood of death, it may not eliminate the transfer. It will reduce the likelihood of the transfer, but if it does transfer, then you will be certain, it will be more likely that you will not have deadly or horrible effects because of it. So I believe in the vaccine. And unfortunately, I am now masked again, even as a vaccinated person, because there are too many who have balked at science and decided that their high school degree, or that their associate's degree, or that their conversation on Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat or otherwise is enough to decide what medicine could be. That if you don't want that person operating on you, then why are you allowing them to determine how we operate in this country?
And for mandatory masking, where are you on that?
I support mandatory masking with a plan. I think that we toss words out there and ideas, but I think that it should be based upon science that is checked in on bit by bit. If the president or anyone locally otherwise mandatory mask because this is what's happening, hands down, masking up, and I'm going to encourage you, and I'm going to support the mandatory mask mandate, the mandate.
Okay. Are there any other questions, Judge Holmes or Jasmine Shirley, Sonia Burrows? If not, I will do any of my colleagues, any of the presidents there. Do you have any questions? If you'll just raise your hand in the chat. I see our federal prosecutor on, Mr. Bruce Brown.
Hey, Bruce.
You can answer there, Bruce.
How are you, young lady? How's everything going?
You have to know, Madam President, he was a mentor of mine as a very young prosecutor when he was the president of the National Black Prosecutors, welcomed me in and has been an amazing leader who I love, adore, and respect. So when I hear his name, I light up.
So
Okay.
proud of you. So proud of you.
Thank you,
Just beaming
sir.
with proud sitting here.
Thank you.
You are welcome. You doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Dr. Woods?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for allowing me to share. I think the presentation was outstanding.
Thank you.
Yeah, we need some help up in your area as well. So Dr. Woods is doing some wonderful things in Bay County. And we certainly one of our most dynamic leaders as we move around the state, and we look to him for leadership often. A good example to all of our presidents. Mr. Miners.
Good evening, everybody. Ms. Ayala, I've seen you a couple of times here in Melbourne and Cocoa, and as always, you've always enlightened me and informed me. I wish you the best in your future endeavors, and I always consider you a heroine for me. So I wish you well, and if there's anything I can do, please let me know.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
President Sean Kendi. Sean Kendi. Okay, don't ask me tomorrow.
Okay, I'm here. Okay. You know I'm in this. I'm in that traffic.
Okay.
Well, I enjoyed the presentation, Miss Aramis Ayala. You are a rock star. I mean, all those nuggets you gave us this evening. You know, I'm in I-4 traffic right now, so I was trying to remember some stuff, but I really couldn't do that because I have to make sure my eyes are on the road. But you were awesome. Best of luck in your bid for the congressional seat. You know, we're all rooting for you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, sir. And so, membership has its privileges. Miss Aramis did not just happen on. She has been working with the NAACP for as long as I can remember. She is certainly, we met her through her then president, Miss Beverly Neal, and she talked about her, almost daughter who just is so much love for her message. And she said, "You all got to meet her," and so we did, and we have been calling her ever since. So we don't have any doubt that she will certainly make all of us proud in Washington D.C. And certainly we love you, we support you, and we will certainly be in touch. And we thank you. So, are there any closing remarks, Ms. Ayala?
I just want to say this is home. I grew up as a kid at banquets. They weren't always fun then, but I understood it was what we needed to do. I've had the honor of speaking at multiples. I have supported, I have been a chair of a banquet. I am a lifetime member. I love and adore what the NAACP stands for. I don't know if I ever told you this, Marcia. I'm sorry, Madam President and everyone. I love Thurgood Marshall. I think that everything that you read his dissents, he's just an amazing human being. Well, he was an amazing human being. And my election, I was elected as the first Black state attorney the same day he was sworn in as the Senate as the first Black Supreme Court justice. So that's just my little NAACP moment. But thank you all for just constantly receiving what I stand for. And I'm authentic, you're authentic, and I think that's why it works.
Thank you so much. Judge Holmes, anything from you? Any other unreadiness you could think of?
No, I'm happy just to be in the same picture frame with Aramis Ayala.
She is absolutely wonderful, and yes, she is a rock star. And if all hearts and minds are clear, Dr. Wood?
Alert audio now.
Yes, ma'am.
Will you close us out with a word of prayer, please, sir?
Oh, Lord, our God, how great and excellent is your name in all the earth. As always, God, we worship, we bless, we magnify, we adore you. We come now, God, with thanksgiving in our hearts. Lord, how truly grateful we are for the NAACP, for the work that has been done and that continues to be done. We thank you for President Ellison. We thank you, God, for Judge Holmes. We thank you, God, for our special guest. God, look upon her, bless her, oh God. And we thank you, God, for the work that she has done and that she will continue to do, God. We pray that you would be with her, bless her, guide her, and direct her. We thank you, God, for what has been shared. God, we have been encouraged, we have been equipped, and we have been empowered with this night. So now, God, dismiss us now, God, from this meeting, but never from your presence. Keep us in your care. Now, as always, we ask that you would go above and beyond our prayer because you're able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the great and mighty power that works in us. This is our prayer in your precious name. Amen.
Thank you. See them Baptist preachers be ready. They didn't even know I was going to call him. Baptists be ready. I'm just saying. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ms. Ayala. We appreciate you all. Take care. Thank you.
Good night.
Alert.
Night.